Welcome everyone to today's webinar. This is the Gateway to Global Aging Data's advanced webinar featuring Charles Harmonized Life History today. Our main presenter is going to be Christian Dindal, and we encourage you to interact with us through the questions and answers or the chat panel for today's webinar if you have any questions along the way, and we'll also take questions at the end. And I'll turn it over now to Christian.
Thanks a lot, Tristan. Welcome to this webinar on CHARLS Harmonized Life History Data. This is joint work that I did with Morten Warndorf from the University of Düsseldorf, and Tristan also helped a great deal along the way. I will talk about two things today. I will, in the beginning, shortly introduce life history data. I will talk about how life history data looks like, what makes it different from a regular, so to speak, data set, and what we did with the data to make it easy to use and to enable you to make use of the full potential of life history data. And in a second step, I will show you the data and show you some smaller examples of what you can do with the data, so you have an idea where you can start once you work with the data on your own. So I will now introduce the life history data to you. As most of you know, there is an increasing number of HRS, health and retirement study, the mother study, or the first of the aging studies, and a number of similar surveys like SHARE and ELSA are also conducting life history interviews. In life history interviews, participants speaks about their life before they entered the study. And we have information with life histories about employment histories before they were in SHARE or in ELSA or in CHARLS, about children that were born, about partnership histories, childhood information. And this is a good opportunity to study their life course, to look at if conditions in earlier life will have an impact on health at older ages, for example, or if the course of the employment life will affect the income in later life. Here you see, so that's a page from the Gateway. Here you see all aging studies that included life histories in their survey program. ELSA started with life histories in 2006, was shortly after joined by SHARE, and the life history surveys of SHARE are called SHARE Life. They conducted two life history surveys, one in 2008 and one in 2017. The second wave was for everyone who joined SHARE in the meantime. A lot of countries joined SHARE after the initial SHARE Life survey, and they had, of course, some refresher samples, and all of these received the SHARE Life questionnaire in 2017. HRS also conducted life histories in 2015, 2017, and CHARLS conducted a life history survey in the same year. Closer, the Korean aging study also conducted kind of a life history survey. They but they focused on job history. So it is a little bit different from the other surveys. There are harmonized data sets for ELSA and for SHARE. We did in the past, and now we recently released the harmonized CHARLS life history, and I will talk about this today. The data collection of CHARLS was between wave 2 and wave 3. So it was a between wave life history, which is important, and it's different from what SHARE did. SHARE did their life histories instead of a regular wave, which might cause problems if you analyze SHARE data, but with CHARLS, everything is fine. We have life histories between 2013 and 15, so between wave 2 and wave 3. So everyone who was a respondent in wave 1 and wave 2 and was still around in 2014 was interviewed. Anyone who entered CHARLS later at wave 3 or wave 4 will not have a life history interview. As you can imagine, the data collection of life history data is somewhat different from a regular survey wave, since people have to remember what they did 20, 30, 40 years ago. You can imagine if I would ask you now, what was your first job and when did you start your first job and when did your first job end and when did the second one start? It might be, you might have to think a little bit about this. And to help people, SHARE and ELSA used a calendar, a life grid approach to life histories. Here you can see a screenshot of this this survey method, and they fill this life calendar in throughout the interview. So when was your children born? When was the first born? The second one? When did you start your first job? And when did it end? And when did it start the second job? And so on till you have the whole life course from, in this case, 15 till the time till the time of the interview. HRS is doing a different approach. They use a mail survey, so they will send you the printed out pages, and then you fill in your life histories yourself. So you start with where you lived, where you went to school, when you went to school, what kind of partners you had, and when, and all family events, all other life events, and in the end, you have a complete picture, a complete life history. And this also works pretty well. So people are able to remember their life and fill this out. In CHARLS, there is another approach. They do a regular data collection as far as we know. I copied you part of the questionnaire. This is an example of the employment histories. I will talk a lot about the employment histories because this is also the most rich data where you have the most variation over time. So they start with the question, when did you start and end your job? And all jobs that lasted for 6 or more months were considered. And where was the main working place of the job? Then you could characterize your job. Was it an own agricultural production, business activities, employment in agriculture or non-agricultural, self-employed, unpaid household business help, or you have been in the army? You could also have gaps between jobs where you did not work. And they also ask, what did you do in this gap years, in the gaps between the jobs? And then you could be unemployed, or you could be ill, or you have given birth, or take care of someone, and so on. So these are all the information we have about the employment histories, and we use this to build our data. And as you can imagine, with this information, the data structure in a life history data set is rather complex. We have spell data, we have a white spell format, and each spell of each respondent is in our data. So in this example, we have two people, and the first one started his first job at 1963. It ended in 1965. He was employed in this job. The second one started in 1965, ended in 1970, and he was self-employed. In this job, the second one, the job started in 1960, ended in 1970, and he was self-employed. So this is how the data looks like. The data in CHARLS looks basically the same, but a little bit different. If you look at the raw data, if you download the life histories, the non-harmonized version, you will have all the start dates, then you will have the information if a job ended or continued, then you have all the end dates, then you have all the types of up to 18 jobs. And you can imagine, if you want to know what kind of job do people have between they were 20 and 30, for example, it's pretty complex to get this out of this kind of data, and therefore one of the main endeavors of our harmonization project was to build a state sequence format, to rearrange the data in a way that we know each state of each important variable at the age of 20, 21, and so on. This is what this new data looks like. Now you have the complete information, in this case, of the work status at age 20, 21, 23, and so on, till people stopped working and we don't have any information about their working status. And this allows you to directly describe conditions at a specific age. You don't need a lot of data management, and this is also the standard format for sequence analysis if you are interested in this. For the CHARLS data, we have harmonized data for partnership status, children status. So did I have a child at a specific age, the WUKU status, and the employment, the work histories. What can I do with this kind of data, and how can I use this? And one way would be, and that's the first one I will show you, would be to describe whole sequences for each respondents, and to make use of the richness of the data, and that I have data for basically the whole life course before they joined the study. And this could look something like this. For the first person, this is number 350 in the data set. He is male and he was employed in the agricultural sector. Then later on, he becomes self-employed in the non-agricultural sector, and then he retired. The woman we have next was self-employed in the agricultural sector. Then she was employed, and then she retired later on. And so you can see, you can rebuild, you can look at the life histories of each respondents, and you can try to find pattern in those. I will show you this later. We could also look at this from in a graph. This looks more easy, and this combines all respondents. So basically what you did see here, this went into this graph. And here you can get a first impression of what the employment histories in CHARLS looks like, and how the life courses of respondents in CHARLS with regard to employment look like. And you can here see quite nice differences between men and women. You see here, for example, that a higher percentage of men are employed or were employed in their life course compared to women. You see also here that it's a little bit hard to tell, but self-employment in agricultural sector is more prominent for women than for men. You also see here a smaller difference, but it is a difference between retirement between men and women, that a higher proportion of men do retire compared to women. The naming of the gateway data follow a consistent pattern, so it's easy to use. If you want to look at partnership status, then partner state will be at the beginning of the variable, and the number at the end indicates the age. So partner state 21 means that's the partnership status at age 21. 22 means for the age 22, and so on. We have a sequence length from 15 to 80. If people are younger than 80 in the CHARLS survey, then of course we only have the sequence till the age they are at the time of the life history interview, but it is possible to have life histories from age 15 till 80. The details on how we did this and how all this is constructed, you can find in the code book. We did include information about children, the number of children you had, but also the number of children younger at 18. Because it might, if you are interested in family sociology, for example, having a dependent child means something different than having a grown-up child. So it might be important for a lot of you to have this kind of information, number of children aged or younger than 18. We also provide the do file for the harmonized CHARLS life history. So if you want to change this and you are interested in how many children younger than, say, 6 years old people have at a certain age, you can simply change the do file and will easily have this information. We have also included the information on partnership, and there we distinguish between living with a partner or living alone. We included the huku with 4 categories, and we have 10 categories of employment histories, and we combine details on work and all periods of not working, gaps between jobs, or at the end if you retire. This will also be included. You might notice that the work state variable have a little c in front of this. I will talk about this later. I will show you a little bit later also. This is because the work histories in CHARLS are quite different from SHARE and ELSA, the previous harmonized life histories. Therefore, the work histories are specific to CHARLS, but you can change it if you want to make it more comparable to Cher and Elsa. We also did include information about childhood conditions in the harmonized data set. There we tried to be as close as possible to what Cher and Elsa included as childhood conditions. This would be the socioeconomic status of parents, in this case the age before 17, and then we have some information about the health status when people were younger than 15 years, and this is really similar to what Cher and Elsa included in their life histories. More information, as I already said, can be found in the code book. This is the code book for the Harmonized Child's Life History. You can download this from the CHARLS web page, from the CHARLS homepage. You simply go to Harmonized CHARLS, and then you below you can click on Life Histories, and then you can download the code book, the do file, but you can also download the harmonized data set. So if you are fine with what we did with the data and you just want to use the harmonized data as it is, you can simply download the data. You can also get data access by using the gateway page, and there you could also get access to Elsa and Cher. Elsa you can download by the UK data service. There will be the harmonized life histories of Elsa. For Cher you can download the do file, but the data you will need to get from Cher, but then you would have harmonized life histories from Elsa, Cher and CHARLS, and you will find obviously the code books of Elsa, Cher and CHARLS on the gateway page. So that's more or less everything I wanted to tell you about the data. If you have more questions about this, you can perhaps ask me later or write us an email, and we are happy to provide you with more information. But now I want to jump into the data and show you how the data looks like and what you can do with the data. I will now basically switch to data. On the slides, I put all important outputs. So if you download the slides later, you will see all the results I will show you now in Stata, but it's more or less nice on the slides. We have two examples of data analysis, some rather basic examples, and then in the second step, some more advanced examples. In the first step, we want to explore the data and look at work state and at partner state, and then we want to see how the employment situation at age 40 looks like, if it does vary by gender, so are there differences between men and women, and we want to see if the employment situation varies by partnership status. So do married or people with a partner work differently than from non-married respondents, and we want to do this for men and for women. Now you see my my starter program. This is my do file. Should be large enough. I hope so. First, I'm loading my life history data. I put all my data in a folder on C. It's called webinar for this webinar. And then I open this, and now I have the harmonized life histories of CHARLS. I think this is large enough. I think this is a little bit harder to see. Should be better now. Here you can see what's in the data. We have all the IDs that you normally should have. We have some information about age and gender, and some survey information like interview year and stuff like that. We have our employment variable here. We have partnership. We have the child state, so total number of living children at a specific age, total number of children under the age of 18 at a specific age, and the HUCO status, and in the end we have our childhood information. You might want to merge additional waves of charts if you want to do some meaningful analysis with the life history data. I merged the harmonized CHARLS data from Gateway, and I'm only keeping the self-reported health from wave 1 and wave 2. I'll show you later a little analysis. With this could simply be done by, obviously this does not work. You can just simply merge the data, and then you included the harmonized regular CHARLS waves to your data. In the beginning, I will do some data manipulation that I want to use later. I want information about cohorts. So I have 3 cohorts later. So people born before 1935, people born between 35 and 45, and people born after 45. I renamed gender. I built an age variable. It's not as important. I will drop everyone who is younger than 40 from my analysis. The threshold for CHARLS is 45 to be included in CHARLS. I just used, in this case, 40. In a first step, we want to look at the work state and the employment situation at age 40. That's a simple tab. And then you see what people did at the age of 40. And you see that most respondents at age 40, 48, 49% if you round it, are self-employed in the agricultural sector. Over half are employed in agricultural sector, employed or self-employed. And second, people are employed in a non-agricultural sector with 25%. But also what you can see at the age of 40, if you include everything that's basically working, you see that nearly 90% of our sample is actively working at the age of 40. So this looks rather okay. If we look at the partnership status at age 40, we notice that most people at age 40 are married or living with a partner. So 96% are involved with a partner in some way. Now we want to look at the employment situation, and if there were any differences between men and women, and that's also a simple cross tabulation. In Stata, it's just tab, then the first variable, the second variable, and with the option col, I will get the percentage, the column percentages. And if we now look at how the work status at age 40 looks like for men and women, we see some interesting differences. Differences with employment status in the agricultural sector is pretty small, but it's rather large if we look at self-employment. So a higher percentage of women are self-employed in agricultural sector. We see that a higher percentage, nearly double, of men are employed in non-agricultural sector. We see also a higher percentage of men are self-employed in non-agricultural sector. So we see nice differences. More women are self-employed in agricultural service and more men are employed in non-agricultural work and self-employed there. All the rest looks pretty similar. A higher proportion of women are retired at this age and a higher proportion of women are at home at this age. In the next step, we want to look and see if the employment status and the differences in the employment status between men and women are also different for the partnership status. And it's basically the same Stata, with basically the same what we do in Stata as before. We just do it by gender, and then we get a cross tabulation once, one for men and one for women. If I go up, we have it here. These are the men. And we see some differences between men who are married or not married. As married, but married also means just having a partner without being married. And we see that a higher proportion of married men are employed in non-agricultural work and self-employed, and that non-married men are more likely to be employed or self-employed in agricultural sector. So partnership status seems to matter in what type of industry men work in. And if we now look at women, we see similar differences, and here we see that married women are more likely to be self-employed in agricultural work, but a higher percentage of not married women are employed and not self-employed in the agricultural sector. We also see some differences with employment in non-agricultural sector, where not married women, or where a higher percentage of not married women are employed than married women. These differences in self-employment are pretty small, but also here you can say married women are more likely to be self-employed. So this seems to be especially a difference for women who are married and not married, whether they are employed or self-employed. So if you're interested in this, that might be something that you want to take a closer look at and can analyze in more detail in your work. Now I would like to switch to the more advanced examples, where we will give you some summary measurements and some visualizations, and also some analysis that you might want to do later on, or show you what you can do with the data. For this second part, if you want to do this on your own, you will need to download the Sadie package. That's an ado in Stata. You can simply install it in data if you type in SSC install Sadie, and then everything will be installed on your computer. If you're interested what it does, and you can look at this paper. And I will use some comments, some commands from this package. First of all, I will use the employment histories between the age of 20 and 60, and I want only respondents who are who have complete for whom I have complete information for these employment histories from age 20 and age 60. So I keep only those with these. So I do a simple regression, and I keep everyone who I have full information. This leaves me with 8,575 respondents who I have full information on their life histories, their work histories from 20 and 60. And in the first step, I create a string variable with the work sequence. It's simply stripe, and then I will give a number. We'll give a letter to all the different states people could be in. A large W for being employed in agricultural work, an S, a large S for being self-employed, a small W for employed in non-agricultural work, a small s for self-employed, F for family business, a U for unemployed, and so on. I have 10 states and I have 10 letters. Then I will sort the data by ID, and I will look at my sequences. You saw this before in the slide. So these are the first 10 cases, case 1 till case 2. And it looks a little bit nicer if I include gender, so I know whether I will be talking about a man or a woman. And here you have the first 10 respondents in our data, and you have their life histories. The work histories. You can see here that the first respondent, he's male. He worked in, he was employed for a couple of years. Then he was employed in the agricultural sector, and then he was self-employed there later on. This one worked in the agricultural sector as an employee, and then later on he became self-employed. And here you can see that this is something that we see quite often, at least in this first 10 respondents, that there is a change from employment to self-employment. Some of them go earlier in retirement, but most of them change from employment to self-employment. You can look at different parts of your data. So these were the first 10. You could also look at respondents from, in this case, the 350 to 354. So 5 respondents from the beginning of your data, and then you can see how they change and what this looks like. But you can't look at all respondents, and you get a first impression of how the employment histories look like. But perhaps you are interested in certain changes. For example, in this case, I'm interested in people who stay at home, and I'm interested in how many respondents changed from employment into staying at home, being at home, and being at home for at least 3 years. And I can simply count this. And then I noticed these are 63. So for 63 respondents, I have a pattern where they were in employment, followed by at least 3 years staying at home. I could look at a change, for example, from being employed in agricultural sector and then followed by at least 3 years being employed in non-agricultural sector, and this is 691. I could also make this more easier and look at the difference from being employed for a change from agricultural to non-agricultural sector. So how many people do this? And then I see these are a little bit more, 759. I could count. So how many people, because we saw this earlier, if you remember, that quite a few or quite some changed from employment to self-employment in the agricultural sector. And I want to see how many there are. And my first impression was right. It's 4,636. You remember I have roughly around 8,000 respondents, so a little bit over half of my respondents have this did change from employment to self-employment in the agricultural sector. So this seems to be something that's quite common. And if you are interested in such changes, then that might be something you could analyze in more detail. You could also build a new variable where you use this kind of information. In the next step, I'm interested in how many people have been long-term unemployed. And long-term unemployment means being unemployed for at least 3 years. They could be unemployed for longer, but at least 3 years. And then I simply include everyone who has a pattern of being unemployed for 3 years. And I built a new variable. And I can look at it here. And then I see that's quite uncommon in CHARLS. So not that many people have been unemployed or have been long-term unemployed. I can look at gender differences if I'm interested in that. And then I see also that differences between men and women are pretty small. So unemployment, at least in my data, between 20 and 60 is not important. I can also do the same and look at people. So how many people stayed at home for at least 5 years? And I can see here that's a little bit more, a little bit higher percentage of people who stayed at home for a longer time, but it's roughly 2%. So also not a really large proportion. I can look at gender differences, and then I can see clearly that this is more common for women than for men. Only 8 men stayed at home for 5 years. In the next step, I would like to look at how many years do people spend in each state they could be in. I use this command that will give me this kind of information. I built a new variable where this Y work state. I have 10 different states, so I will get 10 variables, one for each state. So this is employed in agricultural sector. This is self-employed in agricultural sector. This is employed, self-employed, and so on. And there you can see, so the mean number of years people spent in each state. And then you see clearly that the most years people spent in is self-employed in agricultural sector, followed by employed in the agricultural sector. This is here, and this work state 7 should be retired. You could, if you want, make a graph for this, so it's easier to see. This is a simple graph command in Stata. And then you could see it as a graph for men and women, and then you can see some differences we already saw between men and women, and then you see also for the years they spent in each state, and then you see that self-employment for women is much more important than for men, and employment in non-agricultural sector. It's more important for men than for women, and retirement is also a little bit higher, or women spend more years retired than men, although this is a rather young age to be retired. You could also compare the time men and women spend being at home. You can see it's rarely the case. You can also do this for different cohorts. So you can see whether you have differences between cohorts, how long they spent, in this case, in retirement. 3 years for men, 4 years, nearly 5 for women. And then you can see that the older people are, the more likely they have spent more time in retirement. You could also make a graph, in this case for years spent in home or family work for men, but you could also do it for different states. So you can change this to file, and this for men, this is for women. If you combine these, you see that a larger proportion, or that women spend more time in more time being at home, and older women spend also more time at home than younger women. What you could also do with this, the number of years spent in each state, you could use it in a regression model. It's a rather small regression model. You might want to add some or more variables. What you see here is the work state 5 is being at home, and here you can see that younger cohorts born later are less likely to have spent more time at home, and women, you can see here, were more likely to spend more time at home. This is the first example where I also used information from the Harmonized CHARLS, from the main CHARLS survey. In this case, I use self-rated health. It goes from excellent to poor. So a higher number indicates that people are feeling worse, and therefore I recode this to have a new variable named poor health, where a higher number indicates that I have poor health, and I can use this as a dependent variable and as an independent variable. This is work state 1, so this is number of years I spent employed in the agricultural sector, and here you can see that this has a significant impact on poor health. So more people spent employed in the agricultural sector will have an impact on poor health. Of course, this is just a really simple regression analysis, and you want to do this more refined, as poor health is more of an ordinal variable. You might want to use an ordered logic model, but you would also like to add more independent variables there. And last but not least, what people are most often interested in is to create a chronogram. This is a chronogram for men and women. And here you can see the employment histories between 20 and 60 for men and women, and you see all the differences I already talked about, so I will not go into too much detail here. This last picture concludes the practical session, and I want to talk shortly about harmonization and the harmonization between CHARLS and Cher and ELSA. And here you see the mean years spent in different work states for CHARLS on the left side of the slides, and on the right side you see the employment histories from Cher and ELSA combined. And here you see clearly that there are huge differences in the employment histories, and it's not that much harmonized between CHARLS and Cher and ELSA. And there are you can manipulate the do file to make CHARLS a little bit more like Cher and ELSA, but we decided that the at least in our view, employment histories are so different between CHARLS and Cher and ELSA that CHARLS should have its own format. You see here that being at home for women in the European context is quite important, whereas as you have seen in the CHARLS context, this does not matter that much. To sum up, life history data enables an in-depth study of the entire previous life courses. Spell data is not easy to handle. Our harmonized data set provides you with a state sequence format, which in our view is much more easier to handle. And with this sequence data, you are able to do in-depth study of the life course and also later on sequence analysis if you choose to. If you have any questions or comments, I guess now is the time. You can also look at the aging website from a Gateway, or could write them an email, and then if you have questions later on. And thank you for your attendance.
Thanks, Christian. That was great. Yeah, so if anyone has questions, now is a great time. Myself, Christian, or Morten are happy to answer any questions that you might have.